In every democracy, there's a sacred pact between power and the people. The law protects, and those who enforce it stand as shields of order. But in the heart of Brazil's Amazon, that promise decayed into a nightmare. Because what if the man writing the law was also silencing those who opposed it? This isn't fiction. It's the true story of a powerful lawmaker who turned his office into a death machine. An execution network built not in the shadows, but under the bright light of political immunity. His name was Hildebrando Pascoal, a former police colonel turned congressman. A man once celebrated as a symbol of discipline and justice, who would later be known across Brazil as the Chainsaw Congressman. At first, his image was flawless, a war hero, a man of the people. In the violent, forgotten state of Acre, Hildebrando was the perfect strongman for an era of chaos. He promised protection from drug traffickers, from corruption, from the same violence that haunted every corner of the region. And for a while, people believed him. They wanted to, because in a place abandoned by the state, fear always finds a savior. But as his power grew, so did the whispers. Disappearances, night raids, men who crossed him vanishing without a trace. And when someone asked too many questions, the response was always the same: silence. By the time investigators realized what was really happening, it was too late. Hildebrando wasn't fighting crime anymore. He was the crime. To understand the anatomy of corruption, we first need to dissect the environment that bred it. We're in Acre, a remote state deep in the Brazilian Amazon. A place where power was often built not on policy, but on fear. And it's here that Hildebrando Pascoal emerged. Not from the criminal underworld, but from the federal police. He began as an officer sworn to protect the law. The badge gave him legitimacy, the gun gave him authority, and soon, the uniform gave him ambition. When Pascoal transitioned from police officer to federal congressman, he didn't shed that identity. He weaponized it. He carried the aura of law enforcement into politics, blurring the line between state power and personal control. That transformation was the seed of something darker. Pascoal built his political empire on a brutal promise to his people: order at any cost. He was the strong man in a suit, someone who seemed immune to the rules he helped create. But behind his public speeches and handshakes, a parallel structure was taking shape. He assembled what he called a personal security team, an unofficial militia composed of ex-police, off-duty soldiers, and men comfortable with silence and blood. Their mission wasn't protection, it was domination. And within months, they weren't just enforcing his will, they were erasing opposition. Businesses, rivals, journalists, anyone who challenged Pascoal's control learned what untouchable really meant. People vanished. Cases went unsolved. Local authorities stayed quiet, terrified or paid to look away. The system wasn't failing. It was serving him. And as his power grew, so did the mythology around him. Whispers spread through the streets. Stories too graphic to print, too consistent to ignore. He became known by a chilling nickname whispered in fear: the Chainsaw Congressman. A symbol of what happens when a man of the law decides he is above it. Absolute power never crumbles overnight. It cracks, slowly, silently, from within. By the late 1990s, the empire Hildebrando Pascoal had built in Acre began to rot under its own weight. What once felt like order was now fear disguised as governance. And for the first time, people inside his own circle started to talk. Small leaks began appearing. Quiet testimonies, anonymous tips, whispers from within his inner circle. A local investigator stumbled upon financial inconsistencies linking Pascoal's campaign money to unexplained disappearances. At first, the federal institutions ignored it. After all, this was a congressman, a man who had built an image of control and authority. But then, the stories got darker. Witnesses described the secret operations of his militia, the so-called security team. They spoke of intimidation, forced silence, and methods designed to erase every trace of a target. And one detail in particular would ignite national outrage: the alleged use of a chainsaw in his acts of brutality. Journalists began calling him the Chainsaw Congressman, not as rumor, but as symbol. The fear was enough to destroy him. As the walls closed in, Pascoal's confidence only grew. He denied every accusation, claiming political persecution. But the weight of evidence was becoming undeniable. Multiple members of his militia were arrested and turned informants, revealing the chain of command that led straight to him. Even the institutions that once protected him, police, judges, political allies, began to fracture under public pressure. And when his name finally reached the national press, Brazil stared in disbelief. A sitting congressman, a man with federal immunity, accused not just of corruption, but of orchestrating a reign of terror from within the state. His arrest wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a slow implosion. The illusion of order collapsed, revealing a system so compromised that it had protected a predator wearing a badge of honor. When the handcuffs finally closed, the silence across Acre was deafening. It wasn't relief. It was realization. Because the monster that haunted the state wasn't born in the jungle. It was born in the institution meant to keep it safe. The arrest of Hildebrando Pascoal didn't feel like justice. It felt like revelation, a mirror held up to the state itself. For years, he had operated not in the shadows, but under fluorescent light, surrounded by applause and cameras. His power wasn't hidden, it was institutionalized. When investigators opened the files, they uncovered a network of coercion so vast, it blurred the line between law enforcement and organized crime. Dozens of officers, local officials, and political aides had played their parts, willingly or not. And as the testimonies piled up, one brutal truth emerged. This wasn't just one man's fall. It was the collapse of an entire system built on silence. The trials dragged on for years. Witnesses vanished. Evidence was contested. But eventually the mask shattered. Hildebrando Pascoal, once a symbol of authority, now a symbol of decay, was sentenced to decades behind bars. Even then, his influence lingered like smoke after a fire. He remained, to some, a misunderstood strongman. To others, the perfect embodiment of political rot. The people of Acre were left with questions that never fully healed. How could a man rise so high while committing atrocities in plain sight? How could a democracy tolerate a monster that wore its own badge? And maybe the most haunting question of all, was he truly unique, or simply the first one to be caught? The legend of the Chainsaw Congressman became more than a scandal. It turned into a national warning, a story whispered in every corner of Brazilian politics about how far unchecked power can go before it devours its own creators. In the end, there was no dramatic redemption. No cinematic confession. Just the quiet weight of realization that evil doesn't always hide in darkness. Sometimes it sits in Congress, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, and promising order. Power never disappears. It just changes hands. Sometimes through votes, sometimes through fear. The case of Hildebrando Pascoal wasn't about one man's corruption. It was about a system that rewarded brutality, as long as it wore the uniform of authority. When institutions rot, monsters don't need to hide. They legislate. They lead. They smile on campaign posters. And that's the true horror. That evil doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like control.